Hello, welcome to American Christian or Christian American, episode 2. I'm your host, Sean Legacy, and let's do a little recap on what we talked about last week in the first episode. The first episode, we talked about who the first people were. We talked about the fact that only people who are medium brown could have been the first people. And why did we say that? One thing we said was that human beings are 99.9% identical. If you want to see some of the documentation, look for episode 1 if you haven't seen it, and you can go through with me on the things that I presented. But there's only 0.1% that makes us different. All right? But the only way for those differences to have come, all the people in the world, all the differences that we see today, to come from two people. Because there's only one race, there was only one creation. So whatever those two people first looked like, everybody came from them. We talked about the idea that people who are medium brown have genetics that could produce children who are darker than them and lighter than them. We also talked about the fact that if on the two ends of the spectrum, if you take the darkest complected people in the world and they marry somebody else who is the same, all they can produce is the darkest people in the world. There won't be much variance at all because their genetics are all favoring high levels of eumelanin. Eumelanin meaning that there's two different types of melanin out there, eumelanin being the one that controls the darker skin tones. So the more of it you have, the darker you are, the less of it you have, the lighter you are. On the other end of the spectrum, the person who's extremely light, if they marry somebody else who's extremely light, they will only be able to produce children who are just like that. Now, if you take somebody in that range who's Caucasian and they marry somebody who is another Caucasian, but they're not as light, they can tan more, there could be a variance or a possibility of going either way in that spectrum. But still, everybody who is in a Caucasian range will not be able to produce somebody who is African American. The reason is because they don't have the genetic ability to do that. The extreme darker side of the spectrum, if they marry somebody who is also on the darker side, but not necessarily as far as them, they're only going to produce people within a range between that. To the extreme dark skinned person to somewhere a little lighter but still very dark skinned person. The only people that can produce people in the middle ground and go either way are medium brown people. All right? So if you have a medium brown person, they can produce children, say 4 children. Each one of them could be a different pigmentation. Now, if they marry back in the family, then things are going to stay pretty much the same, which is what happened after Adam and Eve. They pretty much stayed close to the same realms with some variances up until the time of the flood, because people stayed in the same area. Changes would not have occurred in any dramatic degree until after the Tower of Babel, when God changed their languages and spread them out across the earth. And because the language is different, they didn't associate with certain people. So you might have one couple or 2 couples in a particular area, and that would be all the genetics that there would be. They would still be marrying in within their family. They didn't change until Leviticus, where God forbade it. Why did it change? Why, if it was wrong in Leviticus, why wasn't it wrong in the beginning? Well, one, there wasn't any choice. Adam and Eve were the first people, and there was still a small amount of people, and so they had to marry their relatives. But also, because they carried a high level of genetics in the beginning, there wouldn't be a problem with birth defects. Later on, as people began to break down into different groups, they carried less genetic material with them, and eventually it would get to the point where there was not enough variance in your family to create a healthy human being, and they would need to go to somebody else to get some differences. So then it changed. So now we're here at the flood, or shall we say after the flood. Everybody in the world, because of their great sin, was killed. God wiped out the face of the earth, but he saved one family, Noah's family. Noah, his wife, and the 3 sons. All right, so you have Shem, Ham, and Japheth and their wives. Now, those 3 probably were of a variance within the medium brown area. We know that Caucasians came from Japheth. So he might have been a little bit lighter, but he still would have, what we would call today, we would call him a black person. There's not anywhere near Caucasian yet. You might have Shem, who would be the medium ground, who would be maybe that medium brown. And again, it's not precise, it's just giving you an idea because of the evidences we have. And Ham, who is considered even by racists to be the father of black people, he would have probably been the darker complected. Was Ham at the darkest levels that we see today, or we've seen throughout history? No, I don't believe so. And the reason is because he was also still, there was still intermixing within people at that point. But as they went off in their own way, then we would get one of his sons was Cush. We'll look at that in a minute. But they are the ones that formed the Ethiopians, and they also inhabited parts of the land of Nubia, which is even today is considered some of the darkest people on earth. Now, they aren't just there, they're in different places. But this is where they probably started from. And so we have the darkest complected people coming from Cush, all coming from Ham. Now, there is, where racists come in here, I saw one document that I didn't want to use today because it was lying. It said that Ham was the father of black people, and that Shem and Japheth were white people, and so there's really only two races. Well, there is only one race, but they're trying to advocate that white people were first, and they say that Ham had a curse put on him and turned him black. There's no evidence in the Bible that's simply a racist, white supremacist lie. If you look at the text in Genesis 10, you talk about the fact that you look at Noah, who was a vineyard, he grew grapes and turned it into wine, and he got drunk one night. And so he laid naked in his tent. Well, his son Ham went to his tent and saw his nakedness. He came out and told his brothers. Well, his brothers, they didn't want to defile their father, just like the son Ham had. And so they put a blanket over their shoulders, walked in backwards, and laid it across their father, and so they didn't see his nakedness. Later on, when Noah woke up, they told him what had happened, and Noah cursed Canaan, not Ham, which is interesting, and I don't know why, but they claimed that Noah, being the father of black people, that was the curse, that they were turned black. But the curse wasn't even on Ham. It was on Canaan. So Noah was already black, or darker-skinned person, with the others being not far behind. And he had several children, Canaan, Cush, Mizraim, which is also Egypt, and Put, which is later known as Libya. Now, we know that Libya today is lighter Arab-type people, but that changed later on. There were many changes that took place, but it didn't start out that way. These were African nations started from Ham. Later on, of course, there were conquerors and everything else, and things changed. Some people left, some people intermixed, and changed the complexion of people. But in the beginning, they were all children of Ham, all within the darker range people. But the curse was on Canaan. Okay, so, and it mentions nothing about changing the complexion of people. So it's just a lie. So now we've got these four here, and we've also got the other sons. We're going to look a little bit at what was called the Table of Nations, where people started from. It's not going to be an exhausted information. I'm just trying to get some points across it. I just want to bring out some information about it and how the world started to shape itself. Some of the information I'm getting is straight from the text in the Bible, and also some of it's coming from a historian named Josephus. Now, Josephus, I have a document here. This is actually an excerpt taken out of the book that Josephus wrote. When did he write this? Shortly after the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, where over 1 million Jews were killed by the Roman Empire. He was actually commissioned by Emperor Vespasian to write a history of the war, which he finished in AD 78. And he also talked about a lot about the history of the Jews and everything else and where people went. So this man's been dead for a long time. He wasn't around when we came up with the concept of more than one race, or the idea where white people became extra special, which has only been about 500 years. They didn't deal with skin tones and anything like that before. That didn't matter. We want to make it matter because white people wanted power, wanted control. They wanted to dehumanize people, to degrade people, to call people inferior. As we go on, we're going to show that people weren't inferior. In fact, in many ways, they led and they taught white people. But white people conquered and controlled. Now, I'm not saying that white people are the evil people of the world. People have been evil since time began. There have been a few people who follow God. Look at before the flood. All people were of a darker brown complexion, and yet the only people that were saved were Noah and his 3 sons. Everybody else, perhaps a couple million people, were wiped out. So evil is not restricted to white people. So I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that in the past 500 years, it has been the biggest problem. Now, all people are still capable of hatefulness and brutality and everything else. But white people have had a control of the political spectrum and power and Congress. So that's where white supremacy comes in. But as I said going on, this is not about anybody in any complexion, a group of people that is inherently evil. It's not. It's about the human being being inherently evil if we don't follow God. God is the only thing that brings us together, sustains us, and keeps us going. So we're going to look at a few things here in just a moment. Bring this up for you. Okay, so we're going to start here with the 3 sons of Noah. Meaning that this page is the 3 sons of Noah, but Ham is one of the sons of Noah. So he had 4 sons, Cush, Miriam, which is also in Egypt, Put, which I'm not going to deal with right now, and Canaan. But all of these countries here, all of these areas here came from Ham. And then you look under the children of some of these, on the Cush side here, where it has all these different names, you come down to Nimrod. Nimrod was a great warrior, helped establish areas like Nineveh and so on. The Egyptians also spread out in those areas, and the bottom son here is where the Philistines came from. And then you look at Canaan, and it's the firstborn son, and then all these, the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, and so on, all these people that the Israelites had to deal with in the land of Canaan, which were from Ham, from African nations. It says, later the Canaanite clans scattered, and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon all the way to Gerar, and as far as Gaza and towards Sodom and Gomorrah. And so these people were spread out all along. We know where Gaza is today. All these people were spread out along the areas that Israel claims today, and it claimed when Israel was settled. You had the northern tribes and the southern tribes, and of course there was the divided kingdom. And then of course you have Heth and Sin, which were the Hittites and Sinites, are believed to be propagators of the families of China and Mongolia. Now, they probably had other people mix in with them later. Also, because a lot of these nations with northern kingdoms were taken into captivity. We don't know how the intermixing came and would change what their appearance were. But they started out to be a darker complected people. I mean, they're still somewhat darker complected compared to what we know today, but they were much darker at the beginning. Okay, so the Egyptian, this is Egypt on top. Miriam, also known as Egypt, had 8 children. The sons were listed in the first chart. They possessed the country from Gaza to Egypt. Again, showing a strong black presence with Egyptian children. Of course, some stayed in Egypt, and then Canaan as well. Cush, at the bottom here, it's It's cutting it off. I'll have to read this part, but Cush was also spelled Kush, known for Ethiopia, also inhabited the land of Nubia, one of the areas still the darkest complected people on earth. Shem. Again, I'm not getting into exhaustive form. I just want to get some points across. Arphaxad is one of the sons of Shem, and this is where Jesus would come through. So this is a line that we'll pay more attention to. We want to look at what happens along that line to see about the Israelite people. And then, of course, down on the other side, Aram and his son Uz were founders of the area of Damascus, which you hear in the Bible quite a bit. So they were founders from the son of Shem. Japheth, Gomer, founded the Galatians, and then another one of his sons founded areas of people in Germany, and then Turkey, and then Turkey as well. Magog had connections to ancient Russia. Then we got the Medes, also known as the Kurds later on. Javan, all the Greeks. Tubal settled around the Tiber River in Italy, Romans. And then it's part of Turkey and the next one, and also the Moscow River, and Tyre's eastern border of the Orient, Asia. So it's very well those other two from Ham and a Japheth descendant also intermixed in some fashion that created the variants of China. All right, so that concludes today. We're not going to go any farther because I break into some more information I want to present. So what we wanted to look at, we looked at the basics. We didn't look at exhaustive history of the Table of Nations. That's something maybe can be done later. But what we really wanted to look at was the fact that the Bible, people started out who were brown complected people. They didn't start out looking like me. That doesn't make me any less valuable. And from there, after the Tower of Babel, people spread out. They were given different languages. God changed their native languages, so they spoke something completely different, and they didn't understand each other. So they went their own ways, and they started different groups of people, and they would start to diversify. They would start to look different. Immediately? No. I mean, they already had probably some variance within them, but as they went off, certain genes would start to take precedence, and the process would continue. So we're looking at how the world started to change. That it didn't start white and then start darkening up. Whites have less genetic diversity than just about anybody except maybe Native Americans. So we can't gain diversity. We can only lose diversity. The highest level of diversity is within African people, or people, African Americans in the United States. This is the only way, this is where diversity came from. This is where history must be given credit. This is how we can heal. This is how we can understand that God has a plan for all of us. We cannot continue to seek after power if we want to be with God. Now, we can seek it for God's power because God can change our lives. God can help us be the best that we can be. But mankind's power and abuse of people, selfishness and greed, having all the money in the world, having as much money as Elon Musk, and all he wants to do with it is to hurt people. Why not? He got the money from hurting people. He got the money from cheating his employees, everything else. That's not the kind of person we should want to be. We should want to be a child of God who learns that we are loved and cared about and that we love other people. I hope you will listen to this and not take me from what I say, but research on your own. Start to look up things. Ask questions. Don't just ask questions to the same old people you've been asking questions to. They're going to tell you the same old answers. Ask questions around. Ask people who are knowledgeable of different ideas. And together, we can maybe come up with something that works with the Bible, with God, and for your life. to be better. God bless. See you the next time on American Christian or Christian American.